Okay, it's Thursday, October 13th, and this is a SPY recap. And clearly, you can see this was a very interesting day in terms of a big green bar that gapped lower, then strongly moved up all session long. And we have an outside 3 bar to the upside, and that has some various implications going forward. But first, let's look at just the day itself on the 15-minute chart and how it formed relative to how things were opening. We knew we were gapping down big. And quite frankly, it wasn't surprising to me at all that we didn't follow through. Could I have predicted the strong move? No, but once it kind of got underway, it's not surprising at all that this type of thing developed either, because I've seen it before. So clearly, what's interesting, first of all, if we look, let's look at the 15-minute chart zoomed out. And we had this big broadening formation that I've been drawing for a long time. Look at where the bottom of that line happens to be, right here at our big picture, one of our big picture targets, and the yellow line and the bottom of this megaphone here. So to know that we're in a little bit of exhaustion risk on the downside and to see a big bounce from this area, well, that's not really surprising in terms of just what could happen, from that location. Now, as we're heading up, you can see here there is a potential to be moving all the way to the top. Since we're kind of getting to the midpoint of this whole area, we could see broadening out much higher. And if we look at the daily chart, we're kind of looking for follow through a little bit. We'll talk about the targets, and we could be heading up to the top there to take out. Really, it could be heading for this liquidity. Even again, if we're going to eventually head lower to these lower targets, there's nothing wrong with a downtrend like this having some kind of major rally up before it eventually rolls over and starts down there again. Look at this big channel that's in place here, this big line. We can have all kinds of up movement in here before we eventually reach that low at some point. So, but at the moment, we're going to be biased to the upside. We're going to watch the midpoint of this bar tomorrow. As long as we hold out, we'll expect some follow through. I'll discuss maybe in the pre-open video how some of the targets are up here. This, by the way, is a fake little line here. There's really a gap in here between this bar and this bar, so I think we should head up there to the 372 area, I believe it is. We're at 365 now. So there's all kinds of things we should fill, and basically, if this whole broadening action makes some sense, then we should be taking out this area up here around 380 as we move higher. So we're going to keep the bias to the upside. I know I wanted to get to the day itself, but I'll finish up with the bigger picture. You can see here with 1 day to go, we're getting a potential shooter into a hammer week here, as long as we hold there tomorrow, which would mean likely follow through higher. And even on the monthly chart, which I don't have at the moment, but that turned green. This was that green line here that I showed you. As long as we stay below it, we're bearish, but now we're kind of green on the month as well temporarily. So we're going to shift to the upside, which is, pretty obvious, I guess, if you look at this day. But it also is on its own just a broadening day that, who knows, maybe you'll get shocked and get 400 points down tomorrow. So we'll see how the week ends and everything else, but we're expecting follow through higher. Anyway, in terms of today, just to go over it quickly, there really wasn't a sell signal early. If you look at the 15-minute chart, we did take out the lows of the pre-market very early. I'll show you that in a second. Then we started up. I was expecting or looking for the potential for it to fail right here at this purple line. I actually went to the 1-minute chart, which I'll show you in another chart in a moment. But at the beginning of the day, when we had this little downward pre-market low, I was hoping maybe we'd fail here above this little purple line, which are these recent highs, and then curl over to the downside. And once I saw, if we go back to the 15-minute chart, that we exploded pretty strongly above that area. At that point, I wasn't so much, looking for downside activity. I had a feeling we'd kind of maybe be rallying a little more than normal. And if you look here, if somehow you looked at this red bar and felt, to me at this point, when I saw that red bar form, I would have looked for it to, kind of follow through lower, maybe break the midpoint of that move up, and maybe to start heading down to those lows. But if you somehow got short there and anticipated, it never really followed through, and you had to get right out, and you wouldn't have gotten hurt too bad. But this really wasn't a big green to red reversal in the session. I would have played given the way it formed. And anything this consolidation, broke to the upside, it's one of those days where the first move up was up. We kind of paused to almost the halfway point of that move, and then this was really more of a buy signal, at least intraday, even if you didn't want to do anything because you're well below yesterday's range. But what happened happened, interestingly enough, is when we really gapped up and moved. This is the classic 50% rule. When you fail to the downside of one day, move to the 50% of that day, then all of a sudden you expect to reach the top of the range. And we kind of knew that there's a big 3-day range going on in here anyway. So once you hit the halfway point of this bar, it was kind of clear you were going to be heading up to the top of these 3 bars right here. And it would have been tough to get in, but it's a play you should have at least expected. And at that point, we just grinded up for the rest of the day. I was actually gone for a lot of today, and at the end I tried a little put play here, which I broke even. I mean, right here, which I broke even, and then I did a put play in here. It was more just a little guess type of thing, because I really think any downward movement right now, people are going to think they missed the move down here, and that'll bring in some buying. So any broadening lower, I'm still expecting higher until this daily bar, these daily bars break down in some way. But anyway, the puts trades I made up here were just little trades because I came back in the afternoon and I just thought I'd take a little shot that maybe you'd get a little volatility to the downside. They weren't really serious moves in terms of me thinking the market was going to collapse. So that's where we stand. I just wanted to recap the day. There really wasn't a sell right away. It became clear that I've seen these kind of days before where you gap down big and have a tremendous rally like this to the upside. So, you had to be, if you were doing any kind of trading, it had to be on the long side after you saw the opening price action fail to move lower and then break above that little pause right there. And in the end, we end up with a big green bar to the upside. So let's monitor the midpoint of this bar. It's still a 3 bar. So at this point, it's continuation. It's not really a clear signal that we're heading higher, but you expect to at least test the highs of that range. And knowing that we have some targets up here, we should go higher. Again, we'll see what happens tomorrow, and we'll really see how the week ends. And if you can anticipate that this week's going to end up with a hammer bar, which I think it probably will, then you can pretty much anticipate going higher into next week in some form. So you can get long in all kinds of ways here. Hopefully we'll get a little pullback to do that, and expect that at least for a little while we'll be heading higher. So let's see what happens. But that's today. Interesting day. But again, when you really look at the exhaustion that was in play, and the I go back to this chart. This is the classic broadening action to the downside and where it projected to. I don't always look at it that way, but it really just worked out perfectly. So maybe we're going to be heading all the way up there in time, and until the charts change, we'll kind of expect that.